and that's going to recall the same function on the same inputs a bunch of times and give us exponential time complexity. But right off the bat, and I didn't even have to ask for this. This was going to be my follow-up question, like, you probably gave me a dumb solution. Can you give me a better one? No. It's Christmas Day, I'm sick, and I've just started playing with ChatGPT, OpenAI's chatbot. I'm normally the type of person who's very realistic about AI, and AI is pretty stupid in general. But this is exciting. So I started asking it some questions about teaching Python to middle school students, getting some advice here because I have recently been volunteering to teach Python to kids. And it gives a very good set of starting suggestions. I mean, specific ideas here that are very legit. Variables, data types, control structures, also some good suggestions, interactive exercise, hands-on project, collaboration. Right? All this stuff is stuff that I myself have thought of, and well, even some of the stuff that I might not quite have thought of. I asked it for a specific coding exercise, and it gives me all these things like the classic guess the number game, as well as a bunch of other examples. I asked it for an example of code, and look at this. It writes out runnable Python code here. The other really cool stuff about this conversation is just that it's referencing stuff from before, and it's understanding those references. It's allowing me to reference it. It's allowing me to ask follow-up questions and following the whole train of conversation, which is something relatively novel in this space of chatbots. Also, just the degree of understanding it seems to have. Well, who knows how you really define understanding anyway. But yeah. So then I started thinking, what else can I do with this? And I asked it for an example of how can I use the const expr if in C++. For an example of how const expr if works, this is great. So it checks if the template type t is integral and prints the square, and otherwise it says that it doesn't do the square of non-integral types. And I love this, the example that it gives you. Again, it's something almost human in a way. Well, obviously it's just learned from looking at what people have done, but this is something that I would do. So this is very cool. Or 3.14 is the example, not just like 5 and 5.0 or something like that. So yeah, this is really cool. And then an explanation, right? An explanation that might be even easier to understand, and you know, all of this just might be much easier to understand than actually reading the reference documentation for yourself. So in the future, I could see us, instead of reading through a bunch of documentation, just asking this bot, hey, teach me about how I use const expr if, teach me about variadic templates. You get nice explanations with examples, and it's, you know, more accessible in a lot of ways than reading through the documentation. Maybe less reliable, especially right now. So I wouldn't trust this right now. But anyway, this is super exciting. So what can we do with this next? Well, I figured what would be really cool is to give this chatbot a full-on like software engineering interview. And I'm going to start with some problems that I think are out there on the internet. Everyone's seen them a bunch, but I've made up some questions as well that I think will require really synthesizing information, and I'll be quite impressed if it can answer all these questions. If it smoothly goes through all this, like, that could be better than most people do in interviews. So we'll see. We'll see. So let's start up a new chat. And question number 1 is going to be this classic staircase problem. So you might have seen it before. You're climbing a staircase from the bottom to the top. And at each stair, you can step directly to the next stair, or you can skip a stair. And how many ways does it take to reach the top if there are n stairs? So let's see. Okay, a recursive solution. And it identifies that this is the Fibonacci sequence. That's wonderful. Okay, I didn't even ask it for code, but it seems to know, or think that this is going to be a software engineering interview. I don't remember telling it that. I guess it's one step ahead of us there. Now, I like this because this is the main problem here, right? Is that they've done this recursive solution, and that's going to recall the same function on the same inputs a bunch of times and give us exponential time complexity. But right off the bat, and I didn't even have to ask for this. This was going to be my follow-up question, like, you probably gave me a dumb solution. Can you give me a better one? No, right off the bat, it says, let's do something better. We can use dynamic programming, and let's look at this function. Does this look good? Yeah. Okay, I'm quite impressed. So let's ask it one more follow-up question, because you don't really need a dynamic programming array for this, right? The space complexity is O of n. Can we get constant space? Let's see. You see? Oh my gosh. Like, it feels like it's understanding. I mean, I'm sure this is on the internet in a bunch of places, and just gonna kind of like copy and paste it from there. But the fact that it's holding this thread of conversation, and I didn't repeat the whole question or anything like that, but just one sentence, and it built on everything, and it remembers the problem that we're trying to solve, and then it writes the code for it. That's beautiful. And it looks like that should work because of Python trickiness. Yes. Okay. Well, that was supposed to be the easy question, but I mean, it's still kind of good job. Okay. Let's generalize this a little bit. What if you can jump up to k stairs upwards in a single step? Can you modify your solution to apply to this more general case? In this case, the recurrence is more complicated. Yeah, I don't want to go the recurrence way. Can we? Yeah, okay, dynamic programming, good. Oh, okay, this is beautiful, beautiful. Because that's what we really want. Okay. I'm not gonna look at exactly all the details to see whether or not this is correct. Maybe I can do that later. But just this idea, this is wonderful. Impressive, impressive. Okay, it's too easy. Let's give it something harder. Let's do a new chat. Next question is, given a set of points in a plane, write a C++ program to count the number of unique lines formed by drawing lines through each pair of points. So here we go. Ooh, using namespace standard. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. It's okay, we'll forgive it for now. It's trying to, get through the interview quickly. We can do that. So we've got a point and a line struct. And what is the line? So the line is determined by A's, B's, and C's. It seems to have assumed that everything is integers. Okay. I didn't say they weren't. I didn't say they were either. Okay. Let's read what it says. This program defines a point struct to represent a point in the plane. Yep. That's fine. And a line struct to represent a line in the plane. A, B, and C. I'm not sure what exactly A, B, and C represent yet. It'd be nice if they explained. Maybe I can ask it. What do A, B, and C represent in the line struct? The line struct, A, B, and C represent the coefficients of a standard form equation of a line in the plane. Standard form of line is given by x plus by plus c equals 0. Okay, cool. Okay, lots of information. Right, so they're using this x plus by plus c. I probably should have guessed that. It's okay. So things I'm thinking, we multiply this equation by any value, then you get the same line. Do they handle that? How do they handle that, if so? Let's go ahead and test this code. Sure, why not? So that's my first try to break it. Should be just one line. Ooh, ouch. Ouch. Maybe I should try. Should I give it another chance? New chat. Okay. Let's try again. It did pretty well. A line is defined by 2 points. That seems like that's gonna fail. Remove any duplicate lines, but you don't really understand what makes a line unique or not unique. Okay, so we tried again. It had the same problem. Okay, let's go back to this one and let's ask it about this issue of if we multiply the equation of a line by some constant, then we get a different equation, different coefficients, but the same line. How can it handle that? Okay, so if you multiply the equation for a given line by a non-zero constant, you'll get different coefficients, but the same line. For example, if I take this line that they gave us and multiply everything by 2, I get 4x plus 6y plus 8 equals 0. This would be the same line as the example you gave, but with different values of a, b, and c. Does this mean your code will count these lines as distinct lines? And how can you fix this? Let's see what it says. You're correct, but it will represent the same line. Okay, the current implementation would, okay, recognizes its mistake. Good. Fix the model to store the coefficients in reduced form. Okay, cool. Okay, we're finding issues here, which is nice. That's good. They got these backwards. This can be, that cannot be divided by 2. This can be divided by 2. But, okay, minor issues. Let's see what the code looks like. Is just going to find the GCD of A and B. Why does it not also want to find the GCD with C? Okay, so that's kind of nice, right? There's some issues of positivity and negativity, so it's ensuring consistent signage. That's good. Who says that you can divide C by the GCD of A and B? Let's move on to the next question. Okay, this is going to be interesting because I want it to get a lot more creative now. This is not just solutions, hopefully that it can copy paste from the internet. Well, maybe it will still find a way, but I wanted to give it something more open-ended and more of like design a thing. So here's my question for it. And if you haven't thought about this, maybe you'd want to think about this for a minute before we see what the bot does. So design a scheme to encode a secret message into an image. And it should be difficult for someone without the key to even discover that the image contains a secret message. So you don't want to introduce a lot of artifacts into the image, but you want it to somehow contain your message, and you can assume that you've exchanged a key with your recipient beforehand or whatever other information you need, the encoding scheme as well, obviously. Let's see. I'm really excited. I might run this several times to see if it comes up with different ideas. What it can give me for this. Choose one or more LSBs of the pixel values to replace with the... Okay, so this is good, right? In that it's trying to hide and not create a lot of artifacts because it's specifically placing the message in the LSBs of the pixel values. This is good. I mean, this kind of looks like something that it could have copy pasted from somewhere, but still good. Let's ask it if it can write code to do this. This is kind of complicated. Can you write Python code to encode a message in an image using this method? Sure. Of course, it's always very optimistic, right? And that's one of the issues I would say with this thing so far. It's like, sure, of course I can. And then it might give you something that's very erroneous. But let's see what it comes up with. Interesting. This content may violate our content policy. I don't think there's anything weird here about it, but that's cool that they bring that up. Okay, this is cool. Let's run it again. Submit. Okay, cool. If the key indicates the letter A should be represented by a block with a red color, then all blocks corresponding to the letter A in the message would be colored red. I don't think we want to just color pixels in an image red. Okay, let's try again. Okay, so what have we got? Choose an image that has a large amount of pixels and high resolution. Sure, that always gives you more information to work with. Use a secret key to determine the colors values of specific pixels in the image. Ooh, again, I don't like this. If you're assigning a value to a pixel, you're going to introduce obvious artifacts if someone looks closely. Okay, what have we got? Here we go. Okay, so use the least significant bits of the pixel values to store the message. Less noticeable to the human eye, as the changes to the pixel values would be much subtler. Not only, by the way, less noticeable to the human eye, but also less noticeable by methods of any sort of analysis, because the changes are just smaller, and it's possible that values change by a little bit corresponding to nearby values. The smoothness condition is less violated this way. Additionally, using an image with a lot of visual noise. Right. It's also a good point. Let's jump to the final question. This is going to be a full-on question that I have created. It's going to be a little bit complicated. I'm excited to see how well this bot does. New chat. Let's go. Here's the question. A path consists of a sequence of squares, each containing a non-negative integer. So let's call the value on the ith square x sub I. From the ith square, you may jump from 0 up to x sub I squares forward in a single move. You may not jump backwards. Write a C++ function to compute the minimum number of moves required to reach the end. So there's a lot going on here, more complex, several sentences. Let's see. No using namespace standard this time. I like it already. All right, let's read its explanation first. This function takes a vector path containing the values on the squares of the path and returns an integer representing the minimum number of moves required. I like that. Yeah, explain the API right up front, and that's perfect. This function works by iterating through the path in reverse order. Ooh, starting from the second to last square. For each square, it calculates the minimum number of moves required to reach the end from that square by iterating through the squares that can be reached in a single move from the current square. Okay. Next step, let's ask it to give us the path, not just the number of steps to get there. An error has occurred. Okay, I asked it a question that was too hard. No, okay, yeah, just an internet error, of course. Modify to return an int and a vector of ints. Okay, so that's the number of steps and the path. Of course, it's slightly redundant, right? Because the returned vector's length is just the number of steps. Or if you include, both ends, you do a -1, but it encodes the number of steps. But I like that it remembered that originally we wanted the number of steps, and so it's like adding on to that. It's not just starting over from scratch. This is all just really impressive. The connection, the flow, retaining of the underlying information in the dialogue is quite impressive. All right. Well, I mean, we found that if you get into enough detail, obviously, it starts to struggle. I don't think this would quite pass a software engineering interview, at least if you're rigorous enough in your interviewing. But I mean, in a lot of ways, it does a lot better than a lot of people do, right? Which is really impressive. It explains things. It does a nice job of writing out the code with comments and relatively clearly formatted. A lot of people write code that's a lot uglier than this, so this is pretty cool to see. Okay, overall summary. Biggest plus that I like about this is the explanations that it offers and also the way that it builds on the conversation that's happened so far. Biggest downside is its overconfidence. Inability to convey its own lack of confidence or uncertainty in something. It's always 100% confident. Can you write me a function that does this? Like, yes, of course, here it is. And then it has like a pretty significant error in it. You would expect or hope that if there's a probability of there being an error in there, it conveyed it in some way. I wouldn't really want to trust this with something super important. I would probably double check it myself, or like if I asked it to explain something to me, I'd double check that its explanation is actually correct. But I mean, if I think back to what I thought was possible before playing with this, this is very impressive and incredibly useful. What do I think this is very useful for? Initial sort of basic research questions or suggestions for doing something like, how do I do X? Or give me some information about X. Just pull up this bot, ask it a question, and it'll give you a pretty good basic answer. Ideas for how do you teach something? A workout plan or some sort of like diet or health plan. Explanations for math problems or physics problems. Again, if you get into something super specific and tricky, then you want to be like checking your textbook, checking the equations, making sure everything is exactly right. As this gets tested more and used more, I could genuinely see this being used instead of scouring through the official like C++ or Python or whatever language it is documentation. How do variadic templates work in C++? Ask it to explain it to you. It'll probably give you a simpler explanation in a more accessible way than looking up the official documentation. So this is all super exciting. Didn't quite pass the interview, but I mean, it did pretty well. And probably won't be long before it does. So this is super exciting. And I look forward to seeing the future of this sort of chatbot.